I wanted to ask the other thing that's going on in Derby, and we have this extraordinary times, it's surreal things happening on a daily basis in our country and locally. But then there's the business of creating a school budget for next year, which is never easy in a city that's financially strapped, that's economically distressed, and by all indicators of it's going to get tougher out there. And it has gotten tougher in terms of unemployment and businesses being closed. So what is the latest on the Derby Board of Education budget? I understand it's been adopted, but it has to move now to the tax board. And I don't know who wants to tackle that, but I'll throw it to you, gentlemen.
I'll just kick it off and then let Doc, certainly weigh in for certain. So I would tell you that I think a couple key notes here is that for 2 years, we've gotten a 0% increase. And so it's really hard to sustain a program. It's really hard to move a program forward, with no money. So it's always a difficult balancing act for certain. We understand that we're stewards of taxpayer money. By the same token, we have children we have to educate. So this year we are asking for a 5.9% increase, roughly $1 million more increase over the last year. Again, as with most years, there's no new grandiose positions in there. About $600,000 of that is for contractual obligations, paying back the furlough day that we received last year, paying back increases. And then, special education continues to be a driver. And that's probably approximately $300,000 increase. So when you look at where we are, it's really just about sustaining the program. It's about moving the program forward. It's not asking for new things. And truth be told, part of it is the bills catching up. I mean, it's with your house, is with any investment that you have. You cannot continue to make no investment and not have that catch up with you. So I kind of feel that's where we're at. I am hopeful that the people who make those decisions will recognize that they've given us a 0% for 2 years in a row, and that they'll look at it responsibly and recognize that the key to any city is making it a place where people want to live, making it a place where your property values are at a good level, and all that kind of revolves around having a strong school system. So, and
I think there might be sticker shock because that was the 5.9. Did you say 5.9?
Yes.
So that's, in Derby, they seem to, based on my experience covering sort of the tax board, once you get above the 3% range there, people become nervous. And I don't know how the process is even being handled this year, but Dr. Conway, how would you explain to people who might live in Derby or maybe on the tax board and they hear that 5.9, how do you get them beyond that initial, whoa, wait a second, there's a pandemic going on, people are losing their jobs, I don't know if we can do that?
In terms of the increase, and just as the city realized this past year, you can't keep going at a pace of a 0% increase. At some point, as the chairman just pointed out, things catch up and you have to pay the bills. And we're at that point. 2 years of a 0% increase, and we're not asking for more. We're just asking to be able to continue with the minimal services offered today at that level, and not going up and above. What has happened since we put together this budget through the pandemic is we now have to worry about, is that enough? Because you're going to have a large segment of our students who are going to need to play catch up themselves with regards to learning. And how can we do that with our current resources while getting them caught up, but continuing to move them ahead as well? That normally requires additional resources to fill that gap. That isn't in this budget either. So we really need to be cognizant of that. This is a minimal increase to continue with current services while we still look for smart ways to do things. But we have coming off 2 years of a 0% increase, and it's just unsustainable.
And Gina, if you looked at that 5.9 and you balance it over 3 years, that's less than 2% a year. I would almost defy any board of ed or any city agency to average less than the 2% increase in a year when you have over 100 employees. In my mind, it's actually quite remarkable, truthfully.
And then what is the process this year? Because I feel like, usually by this time I've sat in the basement of Derby City Hall, trying to get a cell signal in that dark place. I haven't heard anything though, and I haven't asked in terms of when does BOAT meet? I know the governor gave towns and cities wiggle room, in terms of how they put together a budget, at least towns that go to referendum for a budget. But what's the process? When are you presenting to BOAT? Are you presenting to BOAT? How's that happening?
We will be presenting most likely through a Zoom meeting. We're just waiting for that date in May from the BOAT committee. So they'll be scheduling for any of the departments that were requesting an increase in their budget. They'll be holding interviews with through a Zoom meeting at this point sometime in May.
And Gina, if I just want to say a quick thing about that, if you recall last year at the public hearing, there was about 88, not that I counted, but there was about 80 to 90, 100 people in that meeting where we kind of packed the room. What I would say is that for certain, we'll try to do some advocacy, some grassroots work. We'll try to get some people there to get their opinions heard, like we did last year. We probably started too late last year. And listen, I believe with all my heart that there's election implications that arose out of that evening. And so I do think people pay attention. I do think people noted, the efforts that got made there. And so for certain, just from a grassroots perspective, we'll try to get people out there. We'll try to get people to let them voice their opinions on what they feel is a reasonable education budget.
And I'm sorry, Dr. Conway, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
If I could share contractual increases that are in the budget. We've been working really side by side with the city in terms of these contractual negotiations, and any contractual increases that are in our current budget for next year are contracts that we worked through over the past year and are at the same level contractually in terms of the increases as the city's own contractual increases. So we're really trying to stay in line with each other in terms of what is being negotiated and approaching this as a city as opposed to one board and another board negotiating two different rates. So it has been helpful, but I think the message is important as well, that they're no more than all of our city employees.
And then in terms of, because I was going to ask you, the next question was going to be, look, I'll turn off the camera. It's just us three. What has been the reaction of City Hall in years past? I'm going back 11 years ago. It seemed to me there was this situation in Derby where the city government and the school board were sort of working independently of each other. And then the school board would make a presentation, and that was the first time the city side would actually see what the Board of Education was asking for. And my question is, I don't think 5.9 will be a surprise to the city based on what you're saying. They have an idea of what's been coming down the pike. Have you gotten any positive or negative feedback about the budget proposal, at least informally thus far?
So personally, I would tell you that I don't think anyone's surprised. To your point, I don't think anyone's surprised at the 5.9%. Our budget meetings are certainly open to the public. We encourage the tax board members to participate. We're as transparent as we can be for certain. So I always feel that we try to be as collaborative as possible. And for years, we have tax board members sit in, at our meetings. Having said that, I feel our town starts from, here's what we want the tax rate to be, and everything works off there, right? So I don't think, the decision makers the last few years really spent a whole lot of time looking at our budget. They looked at the bottom line, they looked at what they wanted the tax rate to be, and that's exactly how they set their budget. There's been a few changes this year. I'm cautiously optimistic that people will get. You can't continue to give a zero, but at the same token, I do think we have to get our folks out. We have to get their voices heard, because I don't think anyone's clamoring to give us 5.9%. To be honest.
And then just reading a couple of more comments, and then I'll